Hi, my name is Craig Altoff, and this is my informative media project. For this one, I chose speech or language impairments. First, I want to give a little background and definition. The IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, defines speech or language impairments as a communication disorder such as stuttering, impaired articulation, language impairment, or a voice impairment that adversely affects a child's educational performance. So something, some sort of deficit with their communication that is negatively affecting their academics and education. The study of speech and language actually dates back to early 19th century Europe, where it was focused on individuals who were deaf. The first formal training, however, for speech clinicians began in the 1930s, so well over a century later. However, recently, the relationship between reading and speech language development has led to increased collaboration between teachers and SLPs, speech language pathologists. So, obviously this is a very long period of time from the start of speech therapy or speech and language till recent years, but there's been a lot of progress that's been made over that time. So, with the term speech and language, there is a bit of a difference between both of them. So speech, there's several different types of speech disorders. There's a voice disorder, which is difficulty with pitch, intensity, vocal quality, resonance. There's articulation, so abnormal production of sounds, including adding phrases, syllables, or sounds that shouldn't be there, or omitting those sounds. There's also substitutions where you will put in the wrong sound, or distortions where it just doesn't sound the way it's supposed to sound. And there's also fluency disorders. Those are hesitations during speech that interfere with communication. So the most common form of that you would think of would probably be stuttering. And then language, there's two types of language. There's expressive language and receptive language. Expressive language is the ability to produce language. A deficit in expressive language might be saying getted instead of got, or I overslept because I was late instead of I was late because I overslept. Receptive language, on the other hand, is the ability to comprehend language. An example that one of my resources gave, the friend text, was in a textbook, a teacher asking students to look at a picture of a map on one page, but the student doesn't distinguish that last consonant. Here's the word man instead and looks at a picture of a man on the next page. That'd be an example of a receptive language deficit. Some recent educational trends. So as of 2015, there was 1.03 million students between ages 6 and 21 who were receiving services due to a speech and or language impairment being their primary disability. That doesn't include earlier intervention, so ages 3 up until 6, and it doesn't include students who were receiving speech as a related service, so someone who might have an autism diagnosis as their primary disability. Those students would also be receiving speech, but they're not included in that 1.03 million. Prior to 2000, the primary mode of speech therapy was pull-out. So students would get taken out of class, they would work on speech-specific sounds, but since the new millennium, there's been a more focus on comprehensive intervention that helps support students' overall well-being in academics, so helping to support curriculum, and also in non-academic social skills, and also extracurriculars. Here's a list of resources that provide additional information, strategies, etc. on speech or language impairments. The first one is ASHA, ASHA.org. That's the American Speech Language Hearing Association. They're really the premier authority on speech and hearing in the U.S. So one thing I noticed about their homepage, it includes a lot of information, journals in audiology, speech language pathology, speech, language and hearing research, and speech, language, and hearing services in schools as well. There's also links to events and conferences. There's part of their webpage is about cultural and linguistic diversity, education and continuing education, evidence-based practices, and also advocacy. for issues in both school and in healthcare settings. There's also the Ohio affiliate of ASHA, the Ohio Speech Language Hearing Association, and they're guided by a few guiding principles. So it's to advance speech and hearing technology, to initiate and promote statewide advocacy efforts, facilitate networking opportunities, support ongoing professional education, foster strong membership community, celebrate professional diversity, equity, and inclusion, expand communication opportunities for all, and promote responsible financial stewardship. A specific type, or this website is for a specific type of speech and language deficit. It's for apraxia. So it's apraxiakids.org. It provides resources for childhood apraxia of speech, abbreviated CAS, which is a motor speech disorder. So speech disorder, not a language disorder. This one I thought was a very helpful web page because there was a parent portal, so offering parents specific resources. One of the options was the ability to actually find a speech therapist to help get students children education. There's also a community page with support groups, blogs, and there's also this Walk for Apraxia, which help raises money for research, awareness, and support for those with apraxia, as well as training and education for aspiring SLPs. The next one is the Ohio School Speech Pathology Educational Audiology Coalition. And this one had a really great list of resources. There were links for parent resources for language communication as well as hearing, and for statewide service and treatment programs. So a number of organizations that partner with the state of Ohio, parents can go on and find those different programs and help get services for their child. There was also a list of reading resources and communication and developmental milestones, so you can kind of figure out if your child's on track with their speech development or not. The Department of Speech and Hearing at Ohio State had links for an array of speech and research laboratories with articles and books on a variety of speech and language topics, including child development, language, voice, aphasia, autism, acoustics, and speech perception. So some of these that would be the student's primary disability, but also some of those related services that I talked about earlier, such as autism. And then kind of circling back to the Stuttering with the Fluency, the Stuttering Foundation. This was a really good website. Stuttering is a really difficult condition to treat, but it provides free online resources, services, and support to those who stutter, as well as their families, and support for research into the causes of stuttering. There was really something for everybody on this page. So there were resources for parents of preschoolers, parents of school-age children. There's a category just for kids. So if you were a kid who was having trouble with a stuttering disorder, you could go in and get some resources. Teens, adults, teachers, SLPs, physicians, and employers. So a lot of really good information there for a wide group of people. That brings us into some strategies for general education settings. So the first one on here is preferential seating close to instructor and away from noise sources. So this really is kind of the meat and bones, I guess, of speech and language disorders. For that receptive language, you want to make sure that you're close to the instructor. And that could look different in different settings. Could be toward the front of certain classrooms, could be by the teacher's desk in certain classrooms. And you want to be away from noise sources typically as well. So away from the door, away from air conditioning. That's something that any educator should be able to help provide for in their classroom. Some of this stuff is getting into the, quote unquote, good teaching is good teaching. So repetition of verbally presented instructions. Not everybody hears the first time, whether they have a receptive language deficit or not. So making sure that you are providing directions multiple times, as well as written instructions. We also have reteaching. So obviously that kind of gets into that repetition as well, similar to the verbally presented instructions. But for reteaching, obviously you want to make sure that you are taking some sort of informal assessment to see if a student is making progress or not, and then reteaching those things that maybe they're not getting as well. Having students repeat directions back to the instructor to check for understanding. So that is something that provides students practice with both receptive and expressive language to check to understand, to make sure they received that input, and expressing to make sure that they are able to articulate what they want to articulate. Modeling use of AAC devices, so that's augmentative and alternative communication. So this is something that is a bit controversial in certain parts of speech world, so to speak. Most Western cultures, are very accepting of AAC, whether it's in a device or whether it's American Sign Language. But there are some cultures that you kind of have to do a little bit, allow parents to get a little bit more comfortable with those types of communication. Obviously, if you want a student to be able to use these devices to express what they need to express, then you need to model you need to model how to use that device. And it's also important for parents to understand how that works as well. Incorporating visuals, so picture exchange communication systems, graphic organizers. Graphic organizers can also help organize language and thoughts. Imagery, visual anchors, those can also support students with working memory deficits. And then I think this last bullet point is a really important one: interdisciplinary collaboration between classroom teachers, special education teachers, SLPs, parents, and other related professionals. You really want to make sure that you understand, that everyone understands what a student's particular deficits are, strengths are, weaknesses are, and what their goals are. And everybody should be able to be on the same page and work toward that common goal for the benefit of the student. And the last slide is a list of my references. With that will conclude my presentation.